114.7 billion in transaction processing. Again, a lot of that has to do with financial services. Applications outsourcing, led by applications development, was estimated at 36.1 billion. And the strength in that, we're hearing a lot of demand for ERP. And then in infrastructure, being led by network services, is really the big one at 155 billion US. And very strong in that is help desk. I know right now the Philippines are making serious moves to get bigger into that market because English is the second language there. They've got a good infrastructure. They're taking a lot of business from India, as a matter of fact, in infrastructure services today. Anticipated growth rates. This is based on a compounded annual growth rate from 2004 through 2009. Data centers were at 5.4% growth, desktop 5.9, network 9.3, enterprise applications 7.1. Averaging, all outsourcing was growing at about 6.9%. What's being outsourced? Computer Electronics, which is a magazine, a publication in the United States, did a study of 200 IT organizations in the US and Canada. And what they came back with from these 200 CIOs was applications developed is the most popular. A third of the people are offshoring for applications development. Data center operations at 28%, applications maintenance at 27%. Website and e-commerce systems, portals are huge. Either .NET, Java, whatever technology you're working in, 27. Disaster recovery is still a very good market, again at about 27%. Excuse this, I didn't realize that I had this in here twice, but desktop support's at 23%. 23% is the right number. Voice network operations at 23, database administration at 21. And IT security is sitting down at 19%, which kind of surprises a lot of people. They expect the security piece to be bigger, but it's measured at 19% by these CIOs. The analysts are saying, because they really have their finger on the pulse, in computer world, for companies with revenues over $5 billion US, up to 25% of the IT jobs are going to be offshore by the end of this year. A lot of people think IT outsourcing is dying in the US. Every so often, Washington, D.C. rattles their saber a little bit and says we've got to stop all these jobs going offshore, which isn't going to happen. Washington doesn't have that kind of power. So offshore will continue, and it's going to continue to grow. The $50 billion a year offshore outsourcing business is going to grow at 29% annual rate according to the New York Times. That's that number I gave you before. That run rate that we were running in 2008. 2009 saw that drop to about 10%, but we're back up at running at about 25% run rate right now. And they feel that it's just going to continue to improve. And then the big one from McKinsey is by 2020, in another 10 years, outsourcing offshore is going to yield $175 billion in revenue. So you can see the growth over the next 2 years is going to double the growth from the last 10. It's going to double in the next 10. So it's just going to get more and more popular. Just for you guys to know, what a lot of the Americans are thinking is this. A lot of people are saying that offshore outsourcing is going to stop. The government's going to stop it because of the jobs. And they're going to stop these companies from doing it. They're going to start putting roadblocks in the way so they can't do it. It's not going to be financially beneficial to them. What a lot of people aren't talking about is the baby boomer generation. Does everybody know the baby boomer generation? It's when all those World War II GIs came back and started families. And that was the biggest, and is the biggest generation the United States has ever had. Well, last year they started retiring, and there isn't anybody to take their place. So in spite of the fact that Washington rattles their sabers every now and then and talks about all these things they're going to do to bring jobs back to the U.S. The bottom line is the U.S. isn't going to have the people to fill them. Because they're starting to retire, and they're going to retire over the next probably 10 years. And there's nobody to replace them, because the generation today in the United States is the smallest we've ever had. These young couples have stopped having kids. Trends to watch. This is from Outsourcing News, another magazine that does a lot of surveying. Here they surveyed 650 IT organizations, and here's what they said. 89% of the companies that they surveyed said they're going to continue to outsource. They have absolutely no plans to slow down or stop. 47% feel that the outsourcing's opened new opportunities to them in the U.S., either with other places to spend their money instead of spending it on expensive staff and facilities. 42% believe that outsourcing's improved their financial performance, even though in a lot of publications they'll say that a lot of companies didn't really get a financial benefit from going offshore. 27% feel that competitiveness was greatly improved by having avenues for offshore. 60% of the customers and 59% of the service providers feel that the problems related to outsourcing are people. It's not technology, it's not anything else, it's people. It's people communicating, people being able to understand requirements. I worked for a couple of years with Indian companies, great programmers. They'll do exactly what you tell them, and that's the big problem with India for the American companies. They'll do exactly what you tell them. You give them a technical specification that says, I want to go out into this field and take this cow and I want to teach them how to fly, and that's what India will try to do. And then they'll come back and you'll say, well, you'll say it doesn't work, and they'll say, yeah, but that's what you asked us to do. We knew it wouldn't work. One of the big value propositions for the Brazilian companies is that I've seen in my years of experience is the Brazilians aren't afraid to come back to the client and say, wait a minute, that ain't going to work. Let's do something else. The Indians come from that British subservient mentality where they just say, okay, we'll do whatever you want. And what you'll do is you'll end up wasting a lot of money. You, the American company, will end up wasting a lot of money because it won't work. 2 years ago in Newsweek magazine, there was an article about a company outside of San Francisco that spent $750,000 in 15 months on a project with an Indian IT company. And in 15 months they delivered the code, and the company in San Francisco threw it away. It was absolutely useless. And they went back to the Indian company and they said, you know, what happened? It doesn't work. And the Indian's response was, yeah, but we wrote it exactly to your spec. So it was $750,000 that ended up on a shelf someplace on a disk. Back to this, 27% feel competitiveness was improved, but really what a lot of people are feeling is the people is the problem, especially with the United States and India. I worked with Indian companies for a couple years, and I'll get on the phone with an Indian company and I can't even understand them. They've got that terrible, not terrible, but that accent of theirs that's very, very hard for an American company to understand what they're saying on the phone, in person, and the Americans get very upset with that. Dell started pulling their whole call center back from India because the Americans were getting so upset with the Indians and not being able to communicate. When you'd call the Dell help desk, it would go over to Bangalore. And the Indian people were identifying themselves with Western names like Alice, Jerry, and stuff like that. And with the accent, you knew that they weren't Alice or Jerry. And the American mentality became, you're trying to trick us.